Is the end of Loki going to see Loki create his own origin story? Or is he going to create his own origin story as the leader of the TVA? So I was asked in the comments to do a theory video for episode 5, and on top of that, a mid-season trailer was released one day ago for Loki. So I thought I'd give my thoughts on all that stuff. First off, based on the trailer, it's obvious that Loki is time slipping, that he's able to go into the past, and that either by himself or maybe with Sylvie or some others, he's basically going to go back in time to try and redo what we've seen them do throughout episodes 1 through 4, but obviously they're going to try to get it right this time so that the temporal loom doesn't explode. So obviously, at least Loki survives the explosion, and I think his survival actually has to do with the destruction of the temporal loom. Because remember in episode 1, they had to extract Loki's aura from the temporal loom? I think possibly the destruction of the loom has somehow reconnected Loki to that aura, which causes him to time slip again. And whereas that was mainly a bad thing for him in the first episode, it's good now because it allows him to possibly travel back to the past and do everything over again. And I think basically how that would work is if the temporal loom is destroyed, is that maybe there's a cascading effect. So with the universes that were encased within the loom, I think they either don't just explode and die right off the bat, or there is an eruption, it's just a chaotic collision of universes. Maybe the incursions are beginning and universes are just slamming into each other. But either way, I think the universes are still there for now. And if universes are being destroyed by the destruction of the loom, again, it's a cascading effect, much like it was in 2015 in Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman. And so I think that based on the trailer and what we know so far, I think episode 5 is going to be Loki trying to learn all he can from Ouroboros and Victor Timely in the past, as well as recruit Mobius. Because looking at the trailer, Mobius doesn't seem to know who Loki is or what the TVA is in his timeline. So this could either be a branch timeline Mobius or it's in the past before he was recruited. I know that's not super in depth, but that's basically my theory video for episode 5 portion of this video. But now I wanted to focus more towards the finale and what I think this entire show is about. So I was reading this article today by We Got This Covered, and they talked about how Loki might actually be the leader of the TVA. And it reminded me that the show is indeed called Loki, something I'll admit I tend to forget because I've been caught up in the idea of Kang being the main subject of the show, and that's mainly because I don't find Loki to be interesting as a character in and of himself, whereas Kang is. But the show is called Loki. It is about him. And we've been on this journey with him. We've lost He Who Remains. We've lost Victor Timely. So one of the theories they put forward with the We Got This Covered article is that Loki is actually the creator of the TVA. And because of the Ouroboros effect, a snake eating its own tail, which we've seen with Ouroboros believing that Victor Timely gave him the information to create the TVA, and Victor Timely got his information from Ouroboros, we know that a time loop is definitely in effect. Also, Loki seems to be the only one who can time slip and travel from the past to the future of the TVA, which Ouroboros admitted himself isn't possible. And that may be either unconsciously or not a power Loki gave to himself if he did, in fact, create the TVA. So I think this series could end up with Kang still being the ultimate enemy in the multiverse, but I think that Loki may have set up He Who Remains as basically not necessarily a second in command or a servant, but I think he led He Who Remains to the ideas that helped him defeat all the other Kangs in the multiverse and create the sacred timeline. And so I think now he's going to use Victor Timely to try to set up a similar process. In fact, maybe Victor Timely ends up becoming He Who Remains. Maybe this is all a giant cycle, and that He Who Remains wasn't the guy who truly created the idea of the sacred timeline, it was actually Loki. And here's where I go into more incredulous theory territory and put forward the theory that Loki actually goes back in time and creates his own origin story in the MCU. Now, this theory is based on the comics, specifically Thor issue number 12, during J. Michael Straczynski's run in 2008. This was when he brought Thor back to life after they'd killed him in Thor Ragnarok in 2004. So basically in this issue, Loki sets up his own origin in Marvel Comics. So with Hela's power, he sends himself way back in time, thousands upon thousands of years, back to when Bor was still the king of Asgard. Loki tricks the frost giants into going to fight Bor. During the fight, Loki leads Bor away from the main group, and using his magic, he turns Bor into snow. And so Bor basically just floats away with the wind. Now, Odin sees his father, but decides not to even try to help because he wants to be the king of Asgard. So he basically lets his father die. And Loki knew that that was the case. So then what Loki does is Loki pretends to be the ghost of Bor and goes to Odin and he tells him, I will stop haunting you for the crime you committed by not helping your father if you take on the son of your enemy as your own. And so then Loki goes back to the Frost Giants. Specifically, he goes to Kid Loki, the son of Laufey, the king of the Frost Giants. He tells him that he needs to convince his father to take the fight to Odin. He doesn't tell him all the specifics, but he's basically setting up Kid Loki for his quote unquote glorious purpose. So all of that happens, but he also tells Kid Loki that he basically needs to put on a performance. He's putting on a performance in a way that Odin will see him as the son that he needs to adopt. And so he does, just as we know from the history of Thor and Loki. And just as he promised Odin as the quote unquote ghost of Bor, he does stop haunting him after Odin adopts Loki. And so this is Loki setting up his own origin. It's a cyclical origin story, or an Ouroboros. And so I'm wondering if, it's obviously likely that Loki set up the TVA with how events are going, and he's basically doing it again. Who knows how many times this cycle has been repeated, but at least we're seeing it go down now in real time in this show. And I think at the end, he's going to reveal himself to be the leader of the TVA, not as an evil ruler necessarily, but as a force against the Kangs of the multiverse. And I think that that's going to lead into Secret Wars, where he shows up with the Avengers, and maybe the Avengers are like the main heroes in Secret Wars, but the TVA are like the foot soldiers who go against the foot soldiers of Kang in the ultimate battle at the end of Secret Wars. I know it's a crazy theory. Both are kind of crazy, but I think one is more likely than the other. I know my idea for episode 5 wasn't that in depth. Honestly, we don't have that much information, and with how Disney Plus series episodes usually go, episode 5 of 6 is usually not that important. It'll be important as a secondary storyline, meaning we'll finally learn the origin of Mobius. But beyond that, I don't think it's going to go too in depth with any crazy TVA revelations until the final episode. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.